Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori Amin, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us. Hi, Jenna. Welcome to What Your Next podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
So happy to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a contemporary romance author. I write sexy, heartwarming romance about strong women and the men who dare to love them. And when I'm not reading or writing, I'm chasing after my very energetic and imaginative daughter, or usually watching like the Great British Bake Off with my husband.
Oh my gosh, I love this. So what led you to write romance? Like, were you a romance reader beforehand, or you read? Like, what was the story there?
Yeah, I love romance. A friend got me into it probably in like 2015, maybe. She gave me her old Kindle, and up until that point, I had never had an e-reader, and she had like a bunch of old romance books on there, and she would recommend new ones, and so I just got like totally sucked in. And then, I had my daughter. I started writing. Writing had always been kind of an interest for me and a goal to publish a book, but I always figured it would be some like historical study because my undergrad major was history. So I always thought it'd be like a study of women in power and the way that they influence their image, right, to maintain power. And then I realized I didn't want to do the research for that. But obviously there's that link of the strong woman thing, this woman in power. And so I think that kind of bleeds into my stories with writing these strong female characters, and also wanting to write that for myself, for other women, and for my daughter eventually. So
I love this. So what kind of history did you study? I started history too, like back.
oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So mine was pretty broad, and it was, I would say you didn't really have to pick a concentration. It was like you have to have 6 hours here, here, and here. So I feel like I took a lot of like English history, and kind of monarch stuff. I feel like if I could go back now, I would do more like women's studies, and something a little bit different. But I think I liked history because it was kind of, to me, it was studying like what happened and why, and maybe people's motivations leading into that. And so I think that's why I liked romance, is because I'm always curious like why people do what they do and the choices they make. And so writing romance allows me to explore that because I write dual point of view. So from the male chapter and the female chapter to like really dig into that. So
I love this. Yeah, I love that. I study a lot of women's history classes and women like gender studies. But I also studied like European history, like kind of like World War II,
Oh, interesting.
like all this stuff. And it's funny enough, like actually I try not to read that many World War II books, and there's a lot of them. Like that's like big, and I'm like I try to like space them out. I feel like because I got burned out by studying it in college. I'm like,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. And I love the fact that you're like looking at strong female protagonists, strong female heroines to bring you into the story, and that you get to explore the different themes into your story. So
yeah, for sure.
So in terms of reading, so you started in 2015. I started in 2016 with romance. What were some of your gateway reads, like, or authors?
Oh,
You're like you discover, you're like, oh my gosh, there's a whole world out there.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think even early on, I read a lot of indie authors. And like I said, I had this Kindle that my friend had given me, and I feel like there was this one that was When You're Ready, and it was about a young widow, and she was a mom, and it was, I think, her husband's best friend. I don't know. That one really stuck with me, and that may have been J.L. Beck. I don't remember. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, I feel like a lot of it was contemporary romance. I remember there were some that were kind of like love triangles, because that's what my friend was into. So it was kind of fun to read the books that she had read and then talk about them, even though she had read them way before me. But yeah, and then I would say, as far as like more recently, one of the first indie authors I can remember reading, well, two of them are Megan. Oh my God, why did I just blank on her last name? Well, Amy Dawes and Megan Quinn. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry. And so they were kind of like my gateway into like true indie contemporary romance, especially like sports romance, things like that. And I just remember like, binging everything they had at the time.
I have them on TBR. They've been mentioned so many times, and I'm like, I have to just read them. Like, they're like, I love sports romance, but it's been like really difficult. Like, actually, I'm trying to get into reading in the pandemic. Like, contemporary has just been difficult because I'm like, are they kissing? Like, they're not supposed to. They're hugging. They're having
It's
social
supposed to be
interaction.
historical romance, then mostly like World War II era or
No,
something.
historical romance from Regency and Victorian era. Where
Uh-huh,
they're
uh-huh.
like, there's dukes and there's like viscounts and there's
Yes.
widows who have freedom to do whatever they want and they're
Yeah.
like having lovers. So historical romance is working. Some paranormal has been working too.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, well, it's a vampire, like, like don't just fight you and just do some blood play, but it's totally fine.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, there's no pandemic.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the thing, reading for so many people, myself included, it sounds like you as an escape. And perhaps during the pandemic, our reading preferences have changed because of that desperate need to escape reality. So yeah, I totally get
Yeah, but I think it's kind of fun. I don't know. When the pandemic started, I remember being like, I hope there's a lot of sports romance because at the beginning of the pandemic, there was no sports, and it was
yeah.
like a death, and I was like, I hope there's a bunch of sports romance that I can binge on. So maybe like now that we're on the other side, maybe like sports romance. Megan has the baseball romance. Amy has some football romance. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can try it.
Yep, they can hook you up there.
Yeah. So I love this. So let's see. What has been something that sparks joy? Like whether it's a hobby, self-care, what's something that you like that definitely you do and just you geek out and you're like, oh my gosh, this is great.
Well, I would say that I am kind of a serial hobbyist. So I always like trying new things and learning new things. So throughout my life, I've tried a lot of different hobbies. More recently, and one I've stuck with more is calligraphy. And I love doing that. I took an online class a few years ago because I was like, I really, really want to do this. And I was kind of skeptical about the online, but it was great because they had the lessons and then you did the homework and then you turned it in and they gave you feedback. So it was a really awesome format. And my goal had been like to address my holiday cards with calligraphy. And I was able to do that. And then I had to take a few years off because of my daughter and I had some health issues. So it like wasn't really feasible for me to, you have to sit and like individually for those who aren't watching, right, writing out each letter. And so it's kind of a long process. It can be very like meditative in a way.
Mhm.
And I had to take a few years off, but then finally this last year I was able to kind of pick it back up and I was like, whew, it doesn't look as awful as I was afraid it would. And it was a very peaceful thing for me to return to. So
I love this. And what other hobbies? If you're a serial hobbyist, like what have you dabble on?
let's see. I mean, I've done like salsa dancing and like jewelry, hand stamped jewelry. I used to do a lot of paper crafts. One year I had a goal of like trying 100 new recipes in a year. So, I mean, usually it's something creative, right? Piano, like I had taken piano lessons in high school and I was in band for 8 years. And then my husband and I had a goal to buy a piano. And then we finally recently bought one. And so it's like I need lessons, but I'm getting to return to that love of music that I've had. So it's really fun to kind of rediscover old passions.
I love this. I may take up on the whole 100 recipes because I'm starting to cook again. I decided like April is like no takeout month. So like because I've been having a lot of delivery food. I'm like, maybe not good. And so I think 100 recipes sounds like a fun, exciting process. Like try to discover like what works, what doesn't work. So yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
it was definitely fun. It was like over a year though.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, I don't know if you can do like 100 recipes in 1 month. I feel like it's like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's a lot of cooking.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So no. Let's see. What has been the process of writing during the pandemic? Has it been easier, harder? How are you coping with it?
I would say a little better now. I didn't think that it really affected me, at least for a while. So in February of 2020, I had a back surgery, and my husband's aunt had come to stay with us to help with our daughter because my husband works full time, and I wasn't going to be able to lift, turn, like do anything. So she came to stay with us, and then because of the pandemic, she ended up staying through like last May. So it was like awesome because we had a live-in nanny of sorts for months and months. And then she left, and it was mostly just sad not to have that person in the house, to talk to. But so that kind of shifted my schedule. Which meant I had to be more strategic about what I was taking on. But I also didn't realize, like, I had recently posted about this in my newsletter on Facebook or somewhere, where I had said, I just finished another first full length novel for the first time in like 8 months. And I didn't even realize it because I had like finished Unpredictable last year, which was full length. And then I had written shorter stories, like novellas and short stories for either a charity anthology or a Christmas anthology, or, these shared worlds I was in. So I think for me during the pandemic, I kind of needed that sense of completion by having these shorter projects. And maybe, like you have to get emotional in them, but when you have the full length book, it's really, it's very emotionally draining. And so I think that I was finally able to go back to that recently, but it definitely was a struggle. So yeah, it impacted me.
Yeah, I can imagine. I feel like it's just like it took people by surprise, like how much anxiety we're reducing. And I think we had these grandiose expectations of like, we're gonna write a book, we're gonna master this skill, we're gonna have all these hobbies. And the reality was like, no.
I think it was different for everybody because, I talked to different people, and it's like for some people, they like stayed busy and needed to like make it happen. And I think in many ways that was me. Like I took on these Writer Wednesdays where I talked to a new author every week, and I was doing writing and other stuff, but in some ways, it kicked me back. And it's just like, it seems like there's kind of these two extremes, right? Like you either went for it in 2020 despite the pandemic, or you were like, I just have to live on my couch in my PJs for the year. You know what I mean? And that's okay. Like everybody has to find what worked for them.
Yeah, I can I can attest with it because for me, like for the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was without a job, and I just put my attention to the podcast, and I would say like 100 interviews. Like it was like crazy. Like it was just like I was interviewing a bunch of people.
Yeah.
That was my social interaction. Like I did not know anyone in Chicago, and I was like, I don't have places to go or people to see. So I was in my couch. I was like, okay, let me just talk to people on Zoom and just record them and just do all the magic that happens to a podcast. But then the reality is, I was struggling with anxiety shit. I burned out. Like it was like this constant tug of war of between burnout and productivity,
Yeah.
burnout and productivity. And false start.
Yeah. I really feel that so hard. And it's funny that you say that because I forget that that's like something too, but it's like, yeah, you would just like, and then burn out, and it's hard. Yeah. And I've tried to pace myself, and I'm sure you've probably tried to too, but sometimes it's just like, it's just like this cycle, right?
The cycle. And I think it's interesting because opportunities will come up, and like you may have like opportunities to write here and to do this and do all these projects, and it's all really exciting. You want to say yes to all that, but then you realize like, holy crap, it's a lot of work.
Yes. Yeah. Or you realize by saying yes to these things, you're saying no to other things. I had to kind of do some of that last year. It was like, okay, if I don't immediately like say yes in my head, like I have to do this, then I have to say no. And even though it's hard to say no sometimes, like it's better in the long run.
Yes. So let's chat about your writing, like what you published this year. The first one I want to talk about is like you wrote in the world, in the share world for
Mhm.
Christopher Verse world. So
Mhm.
talk to us about the experience of like, how did you get that project, and like, what is the project all about?
Yeah, so I've written in two shared worlds actually. One came out in December, and that was in Corinne Michaels' Salvation Series world. And then in February of 2021, Hotshot came out, and that was in Christy Bromberg's Everyday Heroes world. So for both of those, if you're an author who wants to apply, I think they're both currently accepting submissions. It kind of opens and closes, but you can find that on the websites, and basically you apply and I don't remember what they each required, but then they decide, like if you'd be a good fit for the world, and either offer you the opportunity or not. And so I wrote in Christy Bromberg's world, which was fun. I got to talk to her from my Writer Wednesdays Instagram TV series, and that was super fun. And that story is an enemies to lovers small town romance. So it's a novella. So again, it was one of my 2020 shorter stories. And basically she has this world with kind of three brothers who are like a fireman, a policeman, and a rescue pilot. And so my guy is friends with them. And so you see kind of the interaction of some of her characters with mine, which was really fun to kind of get to go in and explore her world, but with my characters and hers. So
I love this. And so what's coming out next? Like what are some of your projects you're working on?
yeah, so the book I was talking about that I finally finished, a full-length novel again. So that's Inevitable, and it'll be coming out in April. So it was a short story in a charity anthology. So Willow Winters had this amazing charity anthology, the anthology I Have Lived and I Have Loved. And it was a ton of amazing authors who all came together, donated their stories to benefit the Thousand Lives charity. Which gives gets audiobooks in the hands of mobility impaired readers. So that was a short story that was like 15,000 words, and it's been expanded into probably my longest novel yet, of like 80,000 plus. And so it's a best friend's daughter, age gap, workplace romance. So a little bit scandalous there, yeah. But still tasteful. We'll still have, like sexy but heartwarming. So yeah, it was a fun story to write.
I love this. Oh my God. I can't wait. So let's chat some book recommendation. What is your favorite romance trope to read and what is your favorite romance trope to write?
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, gosh, I mean, I'm kind of a mood reader, so it depends on my mood. I do like sports romances, and I like forced proximity, and best friend's brother, or brother's best friend kind of romance. Usually something with like a touch of the forbidden, like they aren't supposed to be together, right? So like all of my books kind of feature that theme. You have a nanny single parent romance. I guess, this Inevitable, which is the workplace age gap, dad's best friend, kind of a wedding planner and the father, the bride. Like there's always kind of this tension, right? So I would say those are my favorite to read and write.
I love this. And so what has been a book that you can't stop rushing about?
Ooh. I looked at that question ahead of time and I was like, oh, I know the answer to this. And now I'm like totally actually, I would say, and I don't know, this isn't really a romance, but Alessandra Torre, she usually writes a lot of romance. She had the book, The Ghostwriter. I don't know if you've read that one. I think I read it like 2 Christmases ago, and I think just the way the story is woven together, it like, I just kept thinking, oh my God, how did she do this? Right? Like it was so amazing with the way, because it's like this romance writer, and I don't want to give stuff away, but there's snippets of her book in there, but then like as she's writing it, and the way that she revealed the information so that it didn't just all come out at once, was really amazing. So I would say that book has really stuck with me.
I love Alessandra's writing. Like, I think she works like it's a romance, but there's like mystery. There's like an element of suspense, like that is like unique enough that you're just like you want to keep you want to keep turning the pages. And you're like, okay, I want to know what happens next. So yeah,
Yes, yeah.
So tell us where you can find you online.
You can find me on my website, which is www.authorjenna, Jenna Hartley, HARTLEY.com. Or I like hanging out in Instagram probably best, which is at author Jenna Hartley.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna, for being on the show.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For book recommendations, author interview archives, and other fun book resources and tips, please visit WhatChWeNextBlog.com. The What We Next podcast is part of the Frolic Network. To discover new shows to listen and love, please visit frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.